Welcome back to Core Anesthesia. Whether you are a student prepping for tests and boards or a CRNA here to earn CEUs, we are glad you've joined us. For more about us, make sure to check us out on Instagram at Core Anesthesia and online at coreanesthesia.com.
Welcome back to Core Anesthesia. I'm Cole, here with Tanner, and today we have an exciting guest speaker. We've had a lot of you reach out just hungry for some content on financial advice going through school, and then as you transition out of school, just how do you move from going from one of the poorest sections of your life to now having an opportunity where you're bringing in a lot of income, and how do you handle that transition? How do you handle setting yourself up for success from a financial standpoint moving forward throughout the rest of your life? And we couldn't think of anybody better than Vinny Cagungun, or Vinny Two Guns, as some of you may know him on social media. Actually, if any of you have watched this recent season of The Amazing Race, Vinny was one of the CRNAs that was on The Amazing Race, made it all the way to the finale. So we're really, really excited to bring him on. He has a wealth of knowledge, no pun intended, when it comes to finances in terms of getting through school, transitioning out of school. How do you set yourself up investment-wise moving forward? And so, Tanner, I don't know about you, but I'm pumped to have Vinny on today.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo a lot of the things you just said. And on a personal note, Vinny, it's been really awesome to get to know you. And I remember the first time we met, I was actually still in school. You were just recently out of school. We met in it was like a break room. You were eating lunch, and I'd seen your stuff on social media. Core was still pretty new, and I introduced myself. But I mean, you were just so personable and easy to talk to from the get go. And now we've been able to reconnect at conferences, and when you came on to our conference last year. And every time you're just so genuine and kind. And so we appreciate the relationship that we've been able to develop. And I think it's going to be a really interesting talk to hear your vision and your story from a financial aspect. It's also kind of been a thing that we've been really enjoying watching from the sidelines as you've gotten into private investing and all these other things that I'm sure you'll talk about. It's been really fun to just watch your journey. So I know you're busy, so thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. We're excited to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's funny that you bring up that story, Tanner. I remember when you came up to me and you were asking me, we were bouncing business ideas back and forth, and I remembered Game Recognized Game, and I was like, ooh, I like this guy. Who's this guy?
Yeah.
And you said, Vinny, you would probably be perfect for this. A lot of us as students, we go from even before we were nurses, we were making, I don't know, somewhere between $60,000 to $100,000 a year, and then boom, you graduate, and now you're making 300,000, 3x what you used to make. And you said it perfectly. You said it's like someone who wasn't a celebrity or a musician or an athlete, boom, they made it, and now they're making a ton of money, and all of a sudden they don't know what to do with it. And you said, you should probably talk about that more. We would love to hear it. And now here we are like 2-3 years later, and it's really cool to kind of have that full circle experience talking about finance.
For sure, dude. And I mean, I just appreciate you staying in touch with us, and like even just remembering that is meaningful. But it's so true, man. And I hope we get into it tonight. It's like, if you can manage that transition period well, which is not easy to do, I think, the world's yours, what you want to do with your time, your money. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to hear all your insight on that. So I guess getting started, I wonder if it's just a good place to get started by just talking about, maybe your backstory, how you got into becoming a CRNA, why finances are, so important to you. Maybe we could start there and see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So my tagline really is CNA to CRNA. I started from the bottom, and here we are today. I was like, I can't remember, I don't know, 19 years old or 18 years old, where I didn't know anything about finances. I was a nurse's aide. I was making, I think, $12 an hour. And I was like, this isn't moving anywhere fast. And by the time I got into CRNA school, I had already figured out, like, how does this money game work? I've been hustling since I've been a kid in grade school. I was one of those kids selling airheads around the Associated Student Body to all the other students. And I would try to make a hustle, go buy some airheads at Smart and Final and then sell them for whatever, double the price that it costs when you buy it in bulk. And that's really the beginnings of my financial experiences and journey. Fast forward all the way to CRNA school, I actually have a funny story that I want to talk about. It's probably my biggest financial mistake ever in my career. Was right before I got into CRNA school. It was about 4 months, 5 months. I was doing a travel gig in Hawaii, and I got connected from one of my business partners to the next. And he said, I got a buddy that's doing exporting and importing goods from China. These were like when cell phones and things were really booming. And so he was needing more funding. So I funded him. It was about $250,000. And it actually ended up being um, a complete scam. And I got scammed for $250,000 right before I went into anesthesia school.
Oh,
And so when I went into CRNA school, I was like ready to pay this thing off the first day I started. But then that happened and I entered with $40,000. I immediately started travel nursing and I was like, dude, I need to have a little bit of money to be able to sustain any financial situation that could happen during school. And so that is really one of the biggest transformative experiences in my life. And it was probably rock bottom low from a financial standpoint. And then I entered CRNA school, which was just a whole different ballgame. And so that's why it's so important to me to teach how finances work, how this game works. Honestly, it's truly a game of taxation and understanding where and when to place your money and deploy your capital. And so it's been super important to me as an immigrant. I didn't know anything when I first came to America, nor did my parents. So all we knew was work hard, show up, and consistently put in the work. And so I took that as I became an adult and brought that into the business world and started to learn there's a lot more to this game that I didn't know anything about. And so I started diving in, and here we are today.
man, like 250,000. Like for one thing, now the CRNA, that's still a ton of money. But back then when you're approaching into to starting school and to have that just you think you have that type of income or at least that type of investment that's going to be there while you're going through school and that just be wiped out. I mean, I'm sure that you had to pull some big audibles moving into school just in terms of how you're going to adjust and navigate in terms of paying for school to get through? How do you live? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that people forget about is when you're looking at it to get into CRNA school, you look at the tuition. That's only half of it is the tuition because you also have all the costs of living expenses. Most people are not working during that time. There's a lot more that goes into this, and it truly is an investment. I mean, the investment in yourself is the biggest investment that you're going to make, and you have to get through these 3 years and you have to make sure you can get out the other side successful. And then you can be able to build back on that investment and start to reap the rewards of it. But man, losing 250K right before you start, I can't imagine.
I
Man,
mean, that was my massive nest egg. I've been working so hard all throughout the years, and as a nurse, your income potential isn't really that high. And so making $250,000 or at least saving $250,000 is a little harder to do, especially back then. But kind of to break off on that, I would really like to talk about finances as a CR as a NCRNA school as a SRNA. I think it's really important because a lot of the students have so many questions. I get DMs all the time, like, how do I financially get through this? I'm not making any money. And a lot of nurses, ICU nurses particularly, will try to really package that whole investment as a loss, like, oh, I'm going to be losing all this time, the ability that I'm going to be making money. I'll be losing all of this income potential. I would be losing how much tuition is and how much rent is. And then I have to pay for my family. There's no other uh, income for our family as a unit. I think that scares off a lot of people to go either into CRNA school, or it's also scary during because you have no money coming in other than those loan distributions, and they don't come in on a regular
right.
basis.
No, I remember honestly, one of the biggest root causes of the anxiety for me going through school was the farther I got through, the more invested I became and the more concerned I got of what the repercussions would be if I didn't finish it. And I remember our final year, we were in the last semester, and or actually I had graduated and I was about ready to take boards. And I was so nervous. And my wife was like, why? You're going to be totally fine. And I'm like, do you realize all this investment will be for nothing if I can't complete this, if I can't finish this final test to then unlock all of the future potential reapings of that investment that I made. And so it's definitely an investment that you have to pour into to then get a lot more out of in the long run. But so for your specific situation, so you lose a 250K right before you start school. You come in at 40K in liquid cash. What then became your plan for how are you going to survive through school from a financial standpoint? Like, I mean, where did you get that source of income from?
I think that's the most important lesson to that story is in any financial situation or any major situation in life, like that pivot move, right? That pivot move needs to be solid, especially when you're going in with your backs against the wall. You got 250K in debt and 40K in liquid cash, and you have about three to 400,000s of dollars of potential expenses coming up in the next 3 years. You have to know how to pivot in those moments. And in finance, that's just how it goes. Everything is cyclical, everything has ebbs and flow. And so you just need to know when to hop in, when to hop out. And I'm not talking about traditional day trading or anything and sniping different options in those types of deals. I'm talking about just from a macro point of view, being able to understand how and when it is time to enter a market, whether that's stock market, whether that's the real estate market or crypto. Like we're right in the beginnings of a bull run in crypto. So stepping in now would maybe lose your money in the short term because you're probably going to see a dip in the next 3 years or 4 years. But right now, everyone's hopping on because there's that emotional
Mhm.
energy there. So what I did going in, I was like, okay, I got 40K in the bank. At least I know I have some level of an emergency fund. And I think that's the major thing to do as a SRNA. You have to have a nest egg. You have to be able to protect yourself under a financial storm. If you have no income and you have no nest egg, then you're really going to be caught with your pants down if things happen. So,
Mhm.
for instance, what happened with me is I ended up buying a car in anesthesia school, and I'll talk about it a little later. But I bought actually four cars in anesthesia school, and one of those cars was where I ended up paying for it to get from one clinical site to the next. I was waking up to get to Mississippi 2 hours, like 4 o'clock in the morning, to try to get there. And I needed a reliable car. And I bought a car and it was a lemon. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And so then I try to sell that car. Money's getting tight. And this is a perfect example of being able to sustain a financial storm during anesthesia school. So having your emergency fund is definitely important. The main thing I did with the debt was that I took 0% interest credit cards and I used with all I had to do was pay a transfer fee. And I would literally take that 250K from one loan distribution to the next. And so I would pay off as much as I can while being able to pay off school and use my loans to pay off my credit card debt and then take whatever debt I had left, transfer it over to another 0% interest credit card with just a transfer fee. And I would do that over and over again throughout the entire program. So I was living with so much debt over my head that by the time I was done with anesthesia school, I had about, from that 250K that I owed, I had about $30,000 left that I had to pay over. And by the time I graduated, I was like negative, actually. I was using Amber's credit cards to be able to get us through the finish line.
Hmm. Wait, so you're saying that the 250K that you lost before you started school, you were able to pay that down throughout school? Is that
Yes.
what correctly? Okay, so and can you go into that a little bit? Like, how were you able to go into? I mean, 'cause that's a lot of money you're net gaining money throughout school, then, right? If I'm understanding that right. So how were you able to do that?
Yeah, so that was actually the main goal. When I went into CRNA school, I was like, okay, well, Tennessee is a hot market during that time. That was like 17, 18, 19. This is before COVID. And it was a growing market. You're talking about Nashville, Memphis, and East Tennessee. It was blowing up. So I was going to take that 250K that I had invested, and I was like, I'm going to start learning how to do real estate. Let me back backtrack a little bit to these SRNAs that are listening. What I did is once I knew I got into school, this was about 6 months out. I went back and became a traveling nurse. I put up as much cash as I could. And then I took 6 classes, or I'm sorry, 3 classes, which was 9 units. And so I was able to go to my school and say, hey, what courses can I transfer in so I can lighten my load during the program? So I went to Liberty University. I paid whatever $2,000 a course, and it was like 9 units. I was able to get a lighten my load for the first year. So the first two semesters, I was going to tell myself, okay, I got these classes out of the way. I'm going to learn how to do real estate in my first year of CRNA school because that's going to be when the didactic is. I'll be able to have a little bit of time because in a CRNA school program, it doesn't immediately like throw you into the deep end. You actually slowly ramp up to where you're doing real deep didactic information. But in the beginning, you're taking like statistics, you're taking like basics, positioning, 101 type stuff. And so during that time, I was like, bet I'm gonna learn how to do real estate. So I bought my first house in Memphis, Tennessee. It was like $90,000. Again, because I didn't have capital, I borrowed capital to do that. So I already had 250K in debt. I had this massive expense coming up of $300,000 for school for the next 3 years. And then I took on debt to buy this house. And I said, okay, so if I can buy this house, renovate it, and then sell it, then I would be able to do a 1031 exchange, which we could talk about later, and just keep doing this throughout the program. So by the end of the program, I'm going to be a real estate machine. And so when I have my income potential multiplied by 3, 4 times when I do locum CRNA, because I was travel nursing, so I knew I was going to do travel anesthesia. So when I started doing locum CRNA, that's 4x what I was making. I know that I could blow the top off of this whole real estate game and really take it to a whole different level. So that was my plan. I feel like I executed it properly, but I just didn't have the elbow space because I had that 250K in debt. And so I did that over and over and over again. So I was able to make money, like you said, be net positive throughout the years of anesthesia school, despite the fact of not taking income in or not making having $250,000 in debt.
Good for you. I mean, Tanner, you did that too, right? You bought a house throughout anesthesia school and renovated it, right?
Yeah, nothing on that level though, Vinny. I mean, just hearing that story is like, and I want to pause too because a large portion of our listenership are people that are in anesthesia school, and so if like you're going through school right now, school is hard. Like, full stop. School is hard. So if this is sounding like you're failing because you're not doing X, Y, or Z, or you should be adding stuff, like turn the episode off. You know, it's like you don't need to. Let's like first and foremost, you need to know that if school is the most important thing. Now, if you have the capacity and you have the ability to do this, I mean, I think this is where like Vinny, I can't wait for you to continue talking about the more tools and your story because if you can like just one thing I was hearing while you're saying all that is just the resilience to be able to carry that amount of debt. Like that freaks me out. I'm very debt adverse. I'm like I want to keep things ahead of me. And so for you to be able to bear up under that and keep everything moving, like that takes a lot of fortitude to be able to handle. But yeah, we did something sort of similar to answer your question, Cole. We bought a house, renovated it, and ended up selling it and that did very well for us for getting through school. And I was lucky enough to have a partner who was not in school, so everything that she was making was able to basically sustain our living expenses, which was huge. And so our financial picture just had a little bit different of a storyline, but maybe some notes that are the same as far as trying to still be productive and find something to do to generate income while we're in school. But man, just hearing what you're talking about, Vinny, that's very impressive. And yeah, just reason we wanted to have you on. That's a
Yeah.
incredible story. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'd really like to echo what you're saying, Tanner. I think what I did is not what most people should be doing. And I had to do that because I had my back against the wall with 250K and I
Yeah.
had no way to pay that off and I had
Right.
to pay that off.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I would tell any SRNA is you should not be having any stress coming from a financial perspective. You should be strategically setting yourself up to go to school. Now, this is just the perfect picture. If you had all the time and the support and the ability to do so, I would be having a nest egg of about at least $100,000 going into school. You could probably get away with like 60 to $70,000, where you can handle an emergency. You can be able to enjoy yourself through school, right? Because there's going to be so many angles that are going to tax you, whether it's your preceptors, whether it's your classmates, whether it's the program and the didactic. There's so many things that you're going to be growing exponentially within. And because there's growth, you're going to struggle. There's going to be failures. And so I would never advise anybody to go into this CRNA program without having financial readiness. I do want to take back, though. I did have $60,000 that I set up in in an IUL, which is indexed universal life insurance plan, and that basically is an ability to invest into the stock market with a floor of 2%, but then you have a ceiling of 11%. So you can't lose, but you can't win too much. And so those types of plans are appropriate for certain people. I was kind of new when I did that, and so I had that growing. I ended up liquidizing that as my last stitch effort because things weren't working out in the beginning. Mind you, this was the first time I bought a single family home. So it wasn't like, whenever you do something the first time, it's not perfect. It's like
Yeah. For sure.
that first intubation. I'm looking in there. My preceptor's like, "What do you see?" And I'm like, "Nothing but pink, slimy stuff. I can't see anything." And it's
Yeah.
it's the same way. You don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you don't know until you fail, and you have to figure your way through it. And so that's kind of what I did. I again, I don't suggest doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I just love
So
the fact that for one, that it just shows the level of success of real estate, that you're able to do that in the middle of anesthesia school and still net gain money significantly going through school, which I know later in this talk, we're going to talk about real estate side of things. But that is a firsthand example of just how successful it can be if you do it right. And that's even with failures. That's with trialing and airing it out at the beginning, and you still were able to be successful. We'll get in more to 1031 exchanges and stuff, I'm sure, in a little bit here. But kudos to you, man. That is amazing. So let's keep moving here. So you graduate then, and you only have about, what'd you say, 30K left of that to pay back. So you were able to.
30K.
So you moved ahead a significant portion. How was the transition then out of school? Like in terms of going now from probably the poorest that you would have been. Obviously, in your case, I would say for most people, it's the poorest you're probably going to be. You obviously were better off when you graduated than when you started, it sounds like, from a financial standpoint. But like for me, I remember my wife and we dwindled everything down that we possibly had to finish off school with minimal debt. I remember, we were ready for that first paycheck. Like we were ready. We dwindled down to less than 10,000 in our account. But I figured it was worth me starting school as soon as possible because I didn't want to miss out on another year of potentially making that 3x earning. And so for me, I ended up going with less of an egg at the beginning than what I wanted. But so I was the poorest I possibly have ever been when I graduated school. And then all of a sudden now you get that first paycheck and it's like, hallelujah. But now you have this responsibility of how do you handle that and how do you transition out of it? So I know you had a little bit different of a story, but what would you say to the average SRNA that graduates and they have more than six figures in debt from school? What should they do from a financial standpoint in those first few months transitioning into a higher level of income status?
Yeah, I think the very, very first thing to do is, and Actually, even before you graduate, you should probably in your like fourth semester start understanding what the psychology behind money and how money works. So the only reason I was able to do that, be net positive during CRNA school is because money needs velocity to create more money. Money needs to move in order to create more money. And so being a businessman, it's simply moving money from one place to the next to leverage yourself to be able to gain more. And so, if you are a CRNA uh, or about to become a CRNA, I would be talking about, do you understand the psychology of money? Do you understand the psychology of investing? Because for me, when you're carrying that amount of debt, there's an immense emotional load that that takes upon somebody. So for me to be able to move money around while carrying $250,000 of debt over my head, it takes an emotional toll on somebody. So for the very first thing I would tell is a lot of CRNAs should be learning about the psychology of money. And one of the my favorite books is an author, J.L. Collins, where he talks about the simple path to wealth. And I think that was one of the first few books that I learned about just like basic investing. How does money work? And so once I talk about psychology, the next thing I would talk about is, do you have an emergency fund? That's the next thing I would say. You need about 6 months of expenses, essentially, is what you want to be able to do. I think the people who are more risk averse should be carrying more capital just so that you could sustain a bigger life catastrophic event and be able to weather that storm. So if you are averse, you might be carrying more than six. Maybe you might be carrying like 12 months of expenses. And then lastly, you got to understand that debt is the biggest killer to wealth building. And so a lot of people graduate CRNA school and they're like, yo, I'm gonna buy, this beautiful car, or I'm gonna buy my first house, or me and my girl are gonna have a baby, and it's like, might not be the best time to start exploring and taking in more debt and more expense. I would maybe start focusing on that debt. And so the way I did it, Amber and I would graduate with about $350,000 of debt back in 2020. We took that and we took a very balanced approach to paying this off. And so this is just straight execution, nothing fancy here. So we took our budget, we took how much we were making. We used an app called Empower. So if we could put that in the show notes, where it basically shows your net worth, where all your different bank accounts are linked together, all your debt and all your patterns of expense are put in there. And so then you can identify, where is it that we're spending and where are we able to save. And so once you start focusing on that budget a little more, wherever you place your attention, your mind will expand that. And so we just placed all our attention on our finances, knowing that we aren't done with CRNA school. Just because we graduate, got those 4 letters, doesn't mean we don't have $350,000 of debt to continue this journey. So we just put our head down, and we put somewhere in the ballpark of, we paid off our school loans in 12 months, and we started off by putting $7,500 a month, both of us. And then that was the first quarter. And then what we are doing meanwhile from our retirement standpoint is we put as much as we can from a taxation efficient standpoint. So we could talk about that a little later. We were maxing out our 401k, our Roth, our HSA, and then we were actually maxing out our 401k with profit sharing. So that total was about a $57,000-$60,000 a year. But to our school loans, we were still aggressively paying that off, 7.5 in Q1, 10.5 or something like that in Q2, 12.5 in Q3. By the end of Q4, we were both putting $17,500 a month. So we were breaking $30,000 where we were putting into our debt, and we banged it out in 12 months. Mind you, I graduated during COVID around that time, so there was forbearance. So I absolutely used that timing to my advantage, where I wasn't accruing any debt. And so I didn't pay off my school loans during that time. A lot of people were like, "Why aren't you paying into your school loans?" And I said, "Well, no, you place money where money is uh, best treated." So I placed money. Now I wasn't paying to the loans because I wasn't getting any interest. I was putting my money in a high yield savings account or in some type of a liquid, potentially liquid investment that was bringing me back somewhere in the ballpark of 7 to 11% back. So then when I did have to start paying those loans, I had extra capital that was growing on top of that. So I was just throwing that money in every quarter, increasing it. By the end, we were breaking $30,000 a month to pay it all off.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like you can we obviously we're getting into like the details of it. That's the whole purpose of this episode. But I think the biggest mistake I see with people is they just don't give it thought. They don't take time to pause and to think and to develop. And like when I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing your strategy and sitting down, looking at your money, linking your accounts, looking at where the money's going. Like it seems to me the one of the biggest pitfalls is people just don't take that pause and you just move into, oh, here I have a paycheck. This paycheck's really nice. And oh, I wanted that. And now I've got enough money in the bank to buy that. And you buy that. And then you just keep like mulling over to the next month, the next month. And pretty soon you develop habits in these first 6 months that will live with you for the rest of your career. And I just can't echo like your sentiment enough. Like just taking time to develop a game plan. And you might not do it perfectly. Like maybe there was another investment account that offered you a few more percentage points, or there's this that could have been slightly better. But just any kind of game plan where you sit down and you really take a hard look at your income. We said it earlier. If you can manage this transition, I firmly believe that there's rarely a time that somebody will have as big of a pay jump as when they graduate, and that could be at graduating undergrad. But when you go from paying money, no income, to now making some sort of income, like I've never had that kind of a pay raise when I went in on a Monday morning and they just told me that, hey, now your pay has jumped by X amount. But that transition from graduation to when you first start working is so crucial to pause. And I really appreciate all the different steps that you've walked through about telling us your experience, because that's a helpful way to just like look at it. Okay, here's an example. Here's a way that I could model how I'm going to attack those loans, how I'm going to attack setting up and budgeting. You mentioned like the extra expenses. You can be just as poor with a higher income and have a really nice apartment and a really nice car that depreciates and a really nice dinners and whatever, and you're still living exactly paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, I just echo what you said. Take time, make a plan, because that's such a critical point in time.
Yeah, we're just talking about bigger paychecks that they're living from check to check from, and it's really interesting during that pivotal moment in your life, because if you don't stop, like you said, Tanner, you're going to use your point of reference of making 60 to $100,000 and applying that same poor mindset to your 250 or $350,000 net salary.
Right.
So now you're making mistakes and not thinking, you're thinking like a consumer rather than an investor. And if you apply those same mindsets at that higher level, you're just going to fall harder. And
Yes.
so I think like you said when we first met, if you don't know how to do it before you start making the money, or you're not learning how to do it, you're probably going to be, and I hate to say this, there's a lot of high earners out there that are living check to check. They're just living bigger checks to bigger
Yes.
check.
Yeah, for sure. I tell residents all the time, I say, like, money, like you can't dance around it. Money is a huge advantage of getting into the anesthesia field. Like that's a benefit. That's we all, you know that, and that's a great thing. But if you think for 1 second, like you see these people that are flying private jets or they're vacationing in this huge house in Laguna or whatever, and I'm like, if you think that that's your picture moving to the 350 range, like you're still flying coach, you're still shopping at you know Aldi, Trader Joe's, what like whatever. It's like your life doesn't it it realistically doesn't look all that different than when you made 60,000 or 100,000. It gives you is the opportunity to make use of that gap now that you're able to invest and you're able to do these other things. Or at least I hope it does. And if your mindset is like, oh man, when I graduate, like I'm living like this is gonna be
Balls to the
crazy.
wall.
Yeah, this is gonna be crazy. Like I'm gonna be making so much money. You really aren't. You'd be amazed at how fast you can spend that money. And so it's just I hope it's kind of like a gut check of course you're excited about it. You've been dead broke for years going through school, but kind of having maybe more of like a reserved look at that income because you can spend it. My goodness, you can spend it fast.
It's a very, very unique moment in your life because you go from that lower salary to a massive salary. And if you could just maintain your lifestyle
Mm,
for just a couple more years
yeah.
while still having that augmented income, I'm telling you, you could change your life and the legacies after you. Generational wealth can
Yes.
occur within a couple years. And that was one of the main driving factors for me. It was like, okay, well, now that I have paid off my debt and I am financially free now, where does it go from here?
Yes.
Right. And I'm like, oh boy, I can change my nephew's life. I could change my niece's life, generation, so that they don't have to worry about paying for college like I did. They don't have to worry about certain expenses that my parents weren't able to pay or handle for us while we were going to school. Mind you, there's a whole balancing act to that, right? Like you guys
Sure.
have kids. So I can imagine you just don't want to uh, give give them everything, but you want to give them options and opportunity,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think if you have access to that and money does give you access to opportunity, I think that that would greatly affect them and their upbringing, their financial savviness as they grow up. If they learn how to use what are parents using now? Green cards or green light credit cards, where the kids have their own credit card. It shows them how to have expenses, but it also shows them how to invest in the little basic compound interest concepts and stuff. And I'm like, bet I would totally be teaching my kids all of that.
Mhm.
Right.
Dude, compound interest, it's like whenever I have a resident come through and they're potentially looking at hiring on with our group and they're comparing other facilities in the area, I always tell them most people look at these upfront salary amounts and not specifically the benefit package. So like our group has one of the best retirement packages that I've ever seen. So they throw in 13.278% just into a profit sharing plan. No match, no nothing. They just throw that in. And you take that when you're
Wow.
making 300K and you get
Yeah.
13% on top of that, and then you can still max out 23,500 on top of that. And maybe you're taking a $15,000 salary hit per year to go here versus somewhere else. And they're like, well, I want that 15,000. And I walk down and I sit with them and I write it all out during a case. I'm like, look at what this turns into over 30 years. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, between what you could have done at this job retirement wise to this one, and it comes out to like $4 or $5 million difference. And their
Hmm.
eyes just explode. And I'm like, this is the power of when you graduate. If you don't start yourself off with this perspective of I'm making this jump in salary, but I'm going to max out all these retirement accounts because of the power of compound interest. I'm going to set myself up for millions of dollars more in the future than taking a $15,000 pay grade jump right now. And so I echo what you said earlier with the book Simple Plan to Wealth. Like I actually just got done reading that like 3 months ago. I think
Great.
actually maybe you recommended that, and I read it, and it just I mean, thankfully I'd already been taught a lot of those principles, but it just really reiterated for me just how foundational that really is with the power of compound interest. So I guess for those listening that have heard us just talk about this transition period, I guess the takeaways for me would be when you graduate and you move into that first paycheck, as Vinny said, be prepared moving into it because if you're trying to play catch up 3 paychecks later, you're now all of a sudden going to see a drop in your paycheck, and the perspective is huge. If you go from making X amount every 2 weeks or a month, and then now 2 or 3 months later you decide, okay, now I'm going to start putting money into retirement or paying off loans. It's the perspective of now you feel like you're losing that. It's an emotional game. And if you can set yourself up the moment you get that first paycheck where you're maxing out these accounts, that's huge moving forward.
Yeah, like your normal, your new normal becomes your normal. It's your point of relativity, right? And so if you can set yourself up where you're maxing out those accounts, you're really slowing down lifestyle creep. So in just inevitably, right? As you make more money, you're going to start to feel like it's a little more, you feel more comfortable spending an extra 25, $50 a month on some random subscription. And you're like, it's not that big of a deal. And so these things start to kind of life creep into your life. But if you can right away put away the money into some type of 401k or some type of retirement account or some type of vehicle that's making more money, so that you don't see it as accessible capital, it could change your life. So that's probably the first thing that I would tell a CRNA just getting into the game. I would really hone in on retirement accounts because I do want to touch on a few things regarding a retirement account if this is a good time. Retirement accounts are really interesting because I do believe that there's a lot of power there. So the government incentivizes anything that they want you to do to therefore bundle up a bunch of money that the government can control and move around for themselves. So the government will always incentivize the people to place their money in places that the government then has the ability to leverage and control. So a 401k is similar to that concept. So a 401k is basically saying, hey, give the government saying, give me your money now. I'll give you the ability to not get taxed on it and be able to lower your taxable income, and then I'll tax you later so that when you're in a lower tax bracket because you're not going to be working anymore, you then can start taking the withdrawals on your 401k, and so you're essentially saving on taxes. I would like to tell everybody that I think there's a tempered approach to that, especially if you're an investor. Now, if you're a consumer who's going to ultimately make more money now because you're working as a CRNA to later retire and drop into a lower tax bracket, then a 401k is appropriate to you. Um, because you'll be in a lower tax bracket. Now, if you have a mindset of an investor like myself, I actually believe that I will be making more than $350,000 that I'm making today. I'll be making more than that when I retire in 30 years because I'm going to be using that capital through those 30 years to then leverage it and make more capital. So if I plan on being in a higher tax bracket when I'm in my 60s, a 401k wouldn't be appropriate for me. And so I just wanted to touch base on that. So if you're planning to be somebody who ends up making more money and being an investor, and we'll talk about real estate and using private money lending and all these different ways, apartment syndications, all these different ways to invest your money and make more money. I mean, later down the line, I believe that it's appropriate to temper your 401k. You don't always have to max it out. If you feel that you have other avenues that can create more wealth, but also, so the problem with a 401k is the liquidity. You can't get it till you're 65. So, or 59 and a half. So if you can use this money and make more money with it now while maintaining liquidity, being able to use it and pull it and move it wherever you want, anytime you want, then you might want to consider placing your money elsewhere. For a normal Joe Schmo, high earner, a 401k, a HSA, a Roth, backdoor Roth, mega backdoor, those are all appropriate.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point because I think this is I think this is part of the evolution too of your investing, your saving, your financial journey because in my mind and we can all have different opinions on this, but when you're first starting out and if you don't know yourself to be disciplined with money, if you don't know yourself to be committed to strategies that you can maintain for the long term, then there's something safe about a 401k where it leaves and it's not liquid. I can't pull that out without penalties for a new boat or a new whatever. And if you know yourself and you know that you're apt to do those types of things, and you are more nervous that you're going to do this investing, private lending, whatever for 2 years. And then when that doesn't feel as fun or as interesting anymore, you're going to go back to being a spender, then there is some safety against yourself with putting them into these types of retirement. And two, I think it helps you get into the motion of like, this money's leaving, I'm paying myself, and it's leaving my control. It's going into an investment account. I can't touch it. And so I think there's some like good initial behavioral aids, if for lack of a better like terminology for it, to help you flex, like learn those muscle memory of getting money into investing. And but what you're talking about is like, as that continues to evolve, like there's levels to this. And people always say, like, when you want to do something, hang around with the people that are doing it, and it's like, I see people that handle money and I think, man, that is like pretty foolish how you're handling money. And I would never do that. And I'm like, for every person I say that about, there's 100 people that would look about how I handle my money. And they're like, man, you're losing out on points of, interest rates here. You're losing out on this. You could do this back door. You could be like, they have just developed so much more that when they look at how I handle money, they would think the exact same way. And so there's levels to this. And so, if you're new and just getting started, yeah, there's, like Vinny said, there's reasons why that might be beneficial to you. But again, this is why we wanted to have you on, because there's levels past that, and you're talking about the levels past that, and the things that you're already doing, which is amazing. And so I think that's like some self-realization too, of understanding that there's people that are doing it better, and hopefully this is what that is right now. We're listening to someone who's doing it better than I am, or that you might be doing. And so just listening to the additional strategies that you can take past the traditional just Roth 401k mutual, let us sit and cook.
But to kind of push back on what you just said, if you're a high earner and you're able to max out and you become a business and you do either 1099 and you become your own business with anesthesia, and you're able to max out your profit sharing, max out your HSA, max out your traditional, your Roth IRAs, your backdoors. If you do that alone as a high earner, you're already going to be ahead of 80% of financial
Sure.
people out there,
Yeah.
because you just have so much income potential, right? You
Sure.
don't have to be that strategic. And so I do see CRNAs in their 60s and 70s, and they're like, oh, I got 2 million in the bank. And I'm like, dang. In my head, I'm like, good for you. But at the same time, in my head, I'm like, dang, 40 years of making $300,000 and we only put up 2 million? Like, geez, like, I don't know. Maybe they wanted to live a different lifestyle, or maybe their priorities are different and I think
Sure.
that's intimate and sensitive to every one of us. For me,
Yeah.
I'm an aggressive investor that wants to grow and continue to grow, whether that's financially and also in my mindset. And so I try to push the limits, try to push the boundaries. I mean, I've gone through CPAs after CPAs talking about different strategies that I want to evolve into. And they're like, oh no, that's for someone else, or oh yeah, that's really tricky because of this. And they just kind of oversimplify it because they're fearful or they don't know. And
Mm.
so, like you said, getting in the circle of people that are doing this, rubbing
Yeah.
elbows and seeing, just following after and taking a mentor from somebody who's already walked the path that you want to walk, is the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well said.
Before we move on to, can you just do a very simplified rundown for a person that's listening that hasn't really used these different forms of retirement options? When you talk about like a backdoor, things like that, can you just do a really quick overview of what that is and what that looks like? Because now that we're in a higher earning bracket, it changes what we're allowed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the government incentivizes a normal person any one of us to be able to put away $7,000 in your into a Roth account, individual retirement account. And so that's post-tax money. So after you get your paycheck, it goes into your bank. You're able to put $7,000. In 2025, it's $7,000. It goes up every year depending on who's in office. Last year was also $7,000. So let's just say $7,000 you put in to this policy, this retirement account policy that allows you to then that money will grow tax free and never get taxed again because it went in tax post tax, it comes out never to get taxed again. So it's a very powerful tool. But if you make over, I believe right now it's like $110,000 a year, then there's income. They put a limit on that, so you can't put $7,000 into a Roth IRA if you make more than $110,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. It changes every year. But what smart financial people do essentially is put it in a traditional IRA, which there is no income limits to that. So you could put any amount of money into a traditional IRA. So let's say we put $7,000 into our traditional IRA, let it settle, be approved through your brokerage. And then what you do is you roll it over, you do a direct rollover or indirect rollover into a Roth IRA, which then is called the backdoor to doing a Roth IRA when you make more than that income limit. And so this is just a way to still be able to benefit from the Roth IRA while making more than the $120,000 income limit. And so that's what a backdoor Roth is. And just to tell you how powerful a Roth is that if you put $7,000 into a Roth every year and you just allow that to invest into compounding interest, or whether that's the stock market, private lending, real estate, whatever, um, you that will never the income that you make from it will never get taxed again. So something that I do, so that's like the basic idea of a backdoor Roth. What I do is what's called a self-directed Roth IRA and a self-directed 401k. So most solo 401ks or 401k plans or Roth IRA plans are only able to invest that money that you have in it into the stock market. They say you can do real estate with it, but you really can't. You can only invest in index fund that's heavily invested into real estate, not actual real estate itself. Um, but when you do a self-directed IRA or a self-directed 401k, you're able to access and invest those monies into alternative investments, i.e., cryptocurrency, private lending notes, real estate, business acquisition. So you can now move your money that you can't normally touch until you're 59 and a half. You can now move that money around within your self-directed IRA, and then all that money that you make, let's say you're making $2,000-3,000 a month from this business that you bought with your Roth self-directed Roth IRA, all that money that comes back into the Roth never gets taxed again. And so that's a powerful, powerful advanced technique that a lot of people don't know about, but it's very, very common in the circles that I kind of rub elbows with.
Yeah, that was something that, I mean, you had mentioned that to me about 6 months ago. I think it was the first time I had come across, I didn't even know you could do a self-directed Roth. Like, that's just my ignorance of it. And I've already seen the potential of how much that's able to do. And so I thank you for, for bringing my attention to that, because it's something now that I've been able to roll over a lot of things. It's difficult because with a normal, like if you're a W-2 employee, you can't take the retirement account money that you have from there and move it into a self-directed. That's the limit behind it. You have to wait until you switch jobs. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. And when you switch to a different job, then that retirement account that you did have becomes accessible for you now to roll over into a self-directed account. So that is one of the hiccups. But the nice thing is, if you do ever move jobs, or for example, for me, I took the account that I had through my ICU nursing career. And then when I now about 6 months ago realized I could do this, I took the funds from that account and rolled it over into the self-directed so that now I can start investing into these alternate plans and alternate investment strategies that I would never have been able to do. Unfortunately, now with my CRNA retirement group, because it's a W-2 employee job, I can't use those funds yet. But as Vinny is saying, though, it's so powerful because now you can start making way higher returns potentially than what you could get in the stock market, and it's all tax free and keeps earning and earning tax free, never to be taxed again.
Yeah, so taxes is going to be the biggest expense of anyone in their entire life. And so the more money you make, the more taxes you're going to be paying. So if you don't understand the tax game, then you're losing. So that's a major oversight. You're losing so much money year over year if you're not properly placing this money or using this money at the right time. I think just to kind of top off the last topic about retirements, and you asked about the mega backdoor, I think just for the average listener, the first priority when you're talking about retirement accounts would just be an HSA. And oddly, a lot of people won't think that that's actually a retirement account, but honestly, it absolutely is. It's a very powerful retirement account that you should just put in the $4,500 that you can every year. Don't touch it to pay for any health expenses if you can avoid it, and just have that invested into a index fund, a broad-based index fund that mirrors the S&P 500, and just let that grow. And if you ever have to access that money, all you have to do is take the receipts of whatever lap chole or knee replacement that you needed, and keep that receipt and then send that in, and you could access that money at any time you want if you needed it. But the HSA would be my first priority. The second priority would be the Roth, the back door, if you're making more than that 120K income potential. And then after that would be the 401K. That would be my basic assessment for just a normal Joe Smo that works W-2, doesn't know anything about finance. That's how I would absolutely prioritize my retirement accounts.
Yeah, because I mean, don't they say the HSA is the only like triple tax advantage account, right? Because you're putting money in tax free, you're earning tax free, you take it out tax free.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so what would your advice be then? So if you're a W-2 employee and you have an employer that's doing some sort of match for a 401k,
Mm.
would you rank that higher than the ones that you just discussed because you're automatically getting that 100% return right off the bat?
Yes,
Would you do that?
100%. Yeah, that's a great point, Cole. I think that if, I mean, it's far and few between now. You got a great gig wherever you're at, man, because nobody's matching, let alone your situation's not even a
Yeah.
match. They're just
Yeah.
putting it in. And so if they're putting anything in, just be like knuckles to them, be like, dope, that's awesome. But if they're saying, hey, we can match you, I would absolutely prioritize a 401k up to the match. So if they match you at 7%, I'm going to put 401k, my 7% of my income in there. And then I would prioritize my HSA again, and then prioritize my Roth IRA, and then go back to your 401k above the match. And if you have more income there that you can store for now, where you can't access it later, store it for now. I would put it back into the 401k post after the max to whatever the government max is. So for a W-2 is around 20 and a half or 21 a year.
Yeah, and I know this is probably confusing if you're hearing all these different strategies for the first time. So take a look at these different plans we're talking about. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Vinny. I think that makes complete sense. What would you recommend percentage wise? So like, let's for an easy round number, make it 100K. Or I guess it doesn't even
Mhm.
matter what you're making. What percentage would you recommend that you need to be putting away and saving moving forward? Because I mean, the goal is to reach, in terms of my mind, the goal is to reach 25 times your income, right? I mean, I think that's what the Plan to Wealth Collins talks about, which should basically be you can take 4% off of that and live on just that 4% from that goose egg. and continue. I think 98% of funds over the last 50 years that they've tested from that have all succeeded. And actually, a majority of them have continued to grow money moving forward. So you're able to successfully live out the remainder of your days on 4% of that being whatever you want to live on. So most people say their salary times 25 then would be that 4% number. So what would you recommend to get there to be saving percentage wise of your income, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, that's a tough loaded question. I think I would work it a little different than how you brought it up, 25 times your income potential. I would actually reverse engineer it. So think about it like every $1 million, you're able to have $40,000 of, you could use $40,000 every year, right? Because you said 4%.
Hmm.
So for $40,000 is 4% of a million. So if you could live off $40,000, you got to put up $1 million. That I feel like that's a little more palpable for somebody, a little easier to understand. If I need $80,000 a year, I need $2 million put up. So the study that you're referring to is called the Trinity study. It basically, like you said, took surveyed a bunch of different accounts and showed that if you only use and live off of 4% of that actual amount, that principal amount, you'll never take away from the principal. So you could live off of that in perpetuity. So let's say you want 4% of a million, that's 40. 4% of 2 million is going to be 80. And then 3 million, 120. So if you need $120,000, you need $3 million put up. And so you then reverse engineer. Let's say for me, I'd like to say Amber and I could probably live off of $160,000 a year, probably, based off of our expenses, what our lifestyle and our experiences that we invest into. Now, that's not going to be in a growth environment. That's going to be like what I need to sustain life and sustain my current trajectory. So if I wanted to get to $4 million, I set my savings rate extremely high. So a lot of people will set theirs around like 7, 10, sometimes zero, unfortunately, but 10 to 15% savings rates. My saving rate while we were in school with debt was upwards towards like 60, 65%. While right now our savings rate is around 27%. So we're living still significantly below our means. How do you calculate that? I guess it's going to be very different for that person's what they call a FU number, what number that they want, the amount of money that they want to live off 4% of. So for me, my financial independence, my FI number is $4 million. So I'll live off of $160,000 a year, and I would be able to do that in perpetuity and never have to worry about money again. The concept of money wouldn't even be real to me anymore. Um, to do that, it's going to take me about at the rate that I'm at, where I'm growing, but also saving. It'll take me about 30 more years. So I graduated in 2020, and it'll be about 7 to 9 years, if according to my plan.
For you. Good for you. Um, just to be clear, that when you're saying the percentage, like you're doing 27%, where you say, I've seen things to say you should do 15 to 20% a year. That percentage is not saying you take money left over in your savings account and you're putting that aside. That's including money you're putting in these retirement accounts, your HSA, your backdoor
Correct.
Roth, all of that adds up into that. Just to be clear for everybody listening. So if you're making 300,000 a year and you want to do 10%, you're looking at 30,000 a year. If you want to do 20%, you're looking at 60,000 a year. So like if you max out your 23,500 in your 401k, you're putting, or at least for this year, and then you have your HSA of like I think it went to 8,000 this year, right? Or 8,500. I
Oh,
think.
for a married,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
sorry,
I
yeah,
just got
married.
I just got married, so
Yeah,
I'm learning these new
yeah.
rules.
Sorry, I have all these numbers in as married. Yeah, so I guess that is going to be different depending on if you're single versus married. But that all factors into to getting to that end goal of how much you're saving each month or each year.
Yeah, for me, my goal is that passive income, right? So I no longer want to be part of the game where I'm exchanging my money or exchanging my time for money. I'm now in a position where I'm exchanging my money for more time. And so using these strategies of building your financial wealth so that you can later exchange, go from 36 hours full time to 24 hours part time to ultimately where I'm probably going to only be doing one shift a week and probably just do that because it's fun, because anesthesia is fun and not because I have to. And I think that's the main thing for me is my goal and my aim for is financial independence, which I've reached, but now it's about exchanging back that money to have more time so that I can do the things that I love, which is spend time with my family, but also funny, the thing that I like to do is make more money. And so I love to do businesses and start businesses and kind of optimize that so that I can make more income from those businesses while doing something I love doing. And so I definitely practice that ikigai concept, that Japanese concept where you take, where what the world needs, what you love to do, and how can you make money out of it, and where those roads intersect and being able to say, oh, yeah, this is something that I'm passionate about, then I never have to work ever again. And so when I find where those things all intersect, I'm not really working anymore. I'm just doing something that I like to do, and I also get paid to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at now, where I'm focused more on the passive income. So I'm not focusing on my active income. So I'm trying to drop my anesthesia hours while increasing my passive hustle, which is private lending and real estate.
That's so cool to see because, I mean, especially in our industry, you would think there'd be more people that would be in the same boat. Uh, but it actually is the opposite because what we talked about, people get used to these higher income paychecks and they just are a consumer mindset and they keep spending it. I was reading a book a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it, but it did a study on 10,000 Americans that had reached millionaire status. And the three professions that were the most percentage based of those 10,000 were teachers, accountants, and engineers. It wasn't
Mm,
lawyers, doctors, surgeons. I mean, none of that because those the majority of those people got used to that higher salary, and the majority of those people have to continue working well into the years they could retire because they're used to this higher income or expenditures that they're using off of that high paycheck. But the three um, fields that reached that status, they reached it not by a high earning income, but by putting money away year after year. They didn't reach that millionaire status until almost 50 years old, but they reached it. That was the important thing. So I guess I know we're running kind of short on time here. What would your recommendation be? We've talked about the different avenues that people can do to get there because we have enough income that we're bringing in that if we're maxing out all these accounts, we're going to be fine. But if we wanted to reach it sooner, if we wanted to do it in a different way and become less of a consumer mindset and more of a investing standpoint, I know you definitely have taken more of an investing role in this. What are some interesting ways? So we've talked about these self-directed Roths that give you the opportunity to go into different avenues. For the last few minutes, do you want to touch on some of the different ways that you personally are doing this and some ways that with the income CRNAs get that they now have opportunities to invest in certain different avenues?
yeah, because all CRNAs are high earners, basically you put some money up and you could take this money and deploy this capital in different places. So that's a relatively easy concept for a CRNA. Now the harder concept is what do we do with it? Right. And so the first thing I would tell somebody if they don't know what to do with a chunk of change is at minimum, it needs to be in a high yield savings account. In the most recent years, we're talking about 5, 6% on a high yield savings account. And the reason why people say cash is king is because not because it's cash. COVID showed us that cash is dirty and nasty and full of germs and nobody wants to be touching cash. But the reason why cash is king is because it's liquid. You can move it wherever you want. So liquidity uh, equates to velocity. So if you can move money around quickly, then you're able to capitalize and leverage. And so when you have that pile of cash, put that in a high yield savings account. If it's post tax and not in retirement, it definitely needs to be in a high yield savings account. That's going to get you, let's just say 4% right now. As Fed rates come down, uh, high yield savings account rates are going to go down also. So let's say that is the base, 4%. Now we also have to talk about the rate of erosion, right? We have something called inflation, which deflates the value of our dollar bills. So the rate of erosion or inflation occurs around 7%. So if you're not growing your money and you just kind of put it in a bank in a high yield savings account where you're making 4%, the rate of erosion's at 7%, you're still losing 3%. So you have to create something that's going to make more money than that 3% window. So, in short, the way I would break it down in a simplified form would be the stock market is probably where everyone else goes after. That gives you about 7 to 11%. Right now, the stock market is doing really good during COVID. It was about up into the 23, 21%. So there are times where the stock market's fantastic, but it goes up and down throughout the years. And if you just take a look at the inception of a stock market all the way to where it is now, it's probably going to yield you about 7 to 11%. Okay, cool. So now you got a high yield savings account at 4, you got a stock market at 7 to 11. Sometimes goes really high, but not all the time. So let's just call it what it is at 7 to 11, where you could probably have a predictable return. And then after that, I would say apartment syndications, which would be a very easy place to put investments. You just have to find the right operators to do that. Apartment syndications is basically where somebody like me would buy a very big apartment complex for $15 million, has 120 units. I'll raise a bunch of money, go buy it, and essentially apply best practices and do a rehab on this entire complex. So then once they do this rehab, they exit that property making their 7 to 15% returns on it and then pay back all the investors. And so those investors, which would be us with our little nest egg, could get 15% around on average, probably closer to like 9, 10, 11%, but up as high as 15%. So that would be my next place that I would potentially invest in if I needed something that wasn't as liquid but is growing faster than the stock market, that invests you in something more physical like an apartment complex. And then I would enter into the real estate game from a private lending standpoint. That blows the top off of a lot of these different investments, because private lending is essentially what I do, which is buy single family homes, flip the home, get the home back on market and sell it. So what you do when you do that, you use other people's money. So people will private lend money to me, and then I would then pay them at a very high interest rate, which is somewhere in the ballpark of 16 to 21%. There's US usury laws out there that say you can't, unless you're a fiduciary bank or something, there you can't charge somebody a crazy amount of interest. You're then breaking the law. You'll be like a loan shark. I'll give you $100,000. You got to pay me 25, 30% back. That's illegal. But once you fall within the usury laws, which is about 20, 21, 22%, depending on the different states, you can get that money and maintain liquidity, because a lot of these flips, these single family homes, I'll buy one, get it on market within 4 to 6 months. And so the reason why the interest rates are so high is because I need this money to move very fast. I need to borrow this money and then go flip the house, because there's no tenant in the house. I have to then pay my mortgage and there is no income coming in. So that's a bleeding asset until I'm able to flip it. And then once I'm able to flip it, I'm able to get my money out and then do either a 1031 exchange or just do another flip with another set of borrowed money. And so from an apartment syndication, that ranges 11 to 15%. Private lending would probably be the next place that I do. Secured with, I would only say single family homes because that's what I'm most comfortable with. But you can secure private lending with other things, businesses, cryptocurrency. So when I say secured, they say, oh, I have this asset that you can use against or leverage against. If I don't pay you back this money, then you can have this said asset. So in essence, let's say, Cole, you had $100,000 in cryptocurrency and you said, hey, Vinny, I want to borrow $70,000 and then say, hey, look, I got this $100,000 of cryptocurrency. You can have this if my loan defaults to you, because you never want to loan more than about 70% loan to value ratio. Uh, but if you do, you can make much more than an apartment syndication on a stock market or definitely the HSA, but at the same time, maintain liquidity because a flip, if done properly, should only take 4 to 6 months. So I'm able to get my money back while getting and retrieving high interest rates. And that to me is the best place to put your money if you know how to do it and you have the correct network to do it. Other than that, there is no investment better than that outside of starting your own businesses. And that's going to get you and return you much more than 18 to 21%.
Yeah, I because of you showing me this self-directed Roth option, about 6 months ago, I got into a syndication, or started to. So if you're curious about that, feel free to reach out to me. I'll definitely share my experience with that so far. But as you said, that money's locked up for 5+ years. And so the liquidity is down, but I'm potentially going to make a lot more than I would have made in the stock market. So that was option one for me as I took some of the money from the ICU retirement account that I had in a Roth account. I was able to roll that over to a self-directed account, put that into a syndication. So I have that there. My next step this year is I actually want to start doing the private lending with you. And so my question with that is, can you also use a self-directed account for the self-lending? Or does that need to be,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That would
so that
really
blows my
take,
mind. That just blows
yeah,
my
that,
mind because now you're taking the percentage that you're talking about doing and it's liquefied. So for the most part, you're 6 months or under, and you're tax free on all the money that you're earning from that. So you can take all the money you're getting from that and put it back into another investment. And when you finally do take it out, it's all tax free. So like the
yeah.
power of that is just mind boggling to me.
Yes, so that's like taking that we were talking about that backdoor Roth IRA. So you're talking about putting money into a post-tax account like a Roth IRA and then using that as a self-directed retirement account. And so because it went in post-tax, all the money that you're making, that 18 to 21% goes back in to that Roth IRA, self-directed Roth IRA, not getting taxed. And so, like you said, you have liquidity, you have tax free, you have uh, high interest rates, and you're invested in the stock market, which is the best investment. I mean, take a look at any wealthy individual. There is no wealthy individual that doesn't carry a large portion of real estate within their portfolio.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess another thing I wanted to add with this as we're closing up, you've mentioned 1031 exchange with real estate lots of times. And
Mm.
for one, when you were in school, you did that. And you mentioned it again here as you're doing now. Just explain to our listeners here what you're referring to as that, because it is a very powerful tool. Because it's one thing to make a high amount of income, but it doesn't matter what you make. It matters what you keep after the
1,000.
taxes has gone out, right? So this is a great way to utilize savings from a tax standpoint. So you mind just explaining that quick as we start to wrap things up?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the government is incentivizing behavior, right? So the way they incentivize is by giving you ways to put more money back into your pocket while also stimulating economy. And so a 1031 exchange is, in simple terms, is essentially you are if you're able to buy an asset, for let's use a single family as the asset because that's probably the most relatable. You buy a single family home, you force appreciation on it, which basically means you rehab it and you apply best practices to that property, and then you sell that property. And let's say you bought it $100,000, and then you sell it at a good time, and you make 50,000. So you sell it for $150,000. Well, if you don't place that money in a 1031 exchange medium, then and then ultimately earmark that capital, that $50,000 of income that you made to another property, then you're going to get taxed on it. Because if you made $150,000, you bought it for 100,000, that $50,000 is going to get taxed. Well, if you do a 1031 exchange, which essentially means you move it from one property to the next and take all the money that you made and put it into the next property, that's all tax free. You won't get hit take a tax. It won't be a taxable event. So the catch to a 1031 exchange is the government's going to want their money at some point in time. So if you're not doing 1031 exchanges over and over and over again, at the very, very end of it all, you have to pay taxes on that money that you made. But as long as you keep on kicking the can down the road with these 1031 exchanges, you're avoiding paying taxes. And so essentially, you do this over and over again to build this massive amount of wealth to later not have to pay taxes at a very high tax bracket because you're now able to be dropped down into a lower tax bracket because you're not going to be spending or making as much income. And so that's kind of the idea for a 1031 exchange is to avoid taxes as you buy and sell properties and assets from one asset to the next.
And correct me if I'm wrong with this, but let's say you kick it down long enough and you don't need to liquefy the equity you have in a property or properties in later years in your life. You're able to live off of other goose eggs that you have. Then if you do pass away, the next generation can inherit that and they don't pay taxes on all that you kick down the road. Is that right?
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
so theoretically, if you do kick it down the road long enough, you can hand it over to your kids and they could turn around and sell it the day after you pass away and don't pay all the taxes for the years that you've kicked down the road on, which
That's right.
potentially could amount to millions of dollars in taxes that they would have had to pay or you would have had to pay that now gets passed down for generational wealth.
That's right. Absolutely. And a lot of people don't even sell it. If they keep it and they don't ever take that taxable event, they just create wealth off of it. So a lot of people do like short-term or long-term rentals, right? So they never end up selling it. It's a buy and hold. So they just create some type of revenue off of it. So they never end up having to keep kicking the can down the road.
So all this has been really, really helpful. And I feel like I'm just sitting here and I'm like, when we're talking about percentages, so I'm like here on my phone, just multiplying things and looking at like, oh man, am I doing it right? And I'm like looking at different numbers and hopefully you're doing the same thing. And I think I had a conversation with a doc the other day and we were just talking about finances and it's like, a lot of this stuff, maybe it was just like in our generation growing up, but you didn't talk about a lot of this stuff. And then you just feel like you're kind of blindly going through, hoping that you're doing enough, hoping that you've got yourself set up enough, you're doing the right investments, those types of things. And I feel like our generation's much more apt to just talk about numbers and talk about what this actually looks like. And it's incredibly helpful for me to hear this type of conversation, just to look at yourself and see like, hey, am I in on the right track here? Am I doing the right things? So hopefully, wherever you're at in your journey, if you are an avid investor, hopefully we've still been able to give you some things that are helpful to progress in your investing journey. If you are just starting out, or if you are not even to that point yet and you are hoping to just get back onto your feet, and then this could be something that you move into in the future. I think there's something for everybody in this discussion. I know it's been, like I said, incredibly impactful for me. Vinny, what would be your I guess like final takeaways that you would want to give somebody that can span, I guess, all those different scenarios that I just mentioned, if you're, trying to get back on your feet or you're an avid investor, what are the things that you, would give someone to really hold on to from this episode?
Yeah, there's definitely a few things that can go all the way across all the different tax brackets. Um, Automate your investments for consistency. So the more money or nest egg that you see in an account, the more emotional it becomes. The more you move money around, if you have to invest $75 a week in cryptocurrency, doing that every week is going to be taxing, and you're going to feel like, oh, maybe this week I shouldn't do it, or this month I should hold back. Automate your investments for consistency. Take that out of the equation. Um, the other thing I would say is this is a long game. Man, I've been hustling for 20 plus years now. And so this is not something where you're like, oh yeah, I'm not making 100K overnight, then I'm not into it. That's that Instagram social media lifestyle that they try to promote on you. This is the long game. You got to know how to play this long game. You got to have discipline and consistency. Another thing I would say is get in early, like Cole was saying. Compounding interest is played by time. So you have to do it over time. And so it's if you just keep it super simple, automate your stuff, play the long game and get in early, that alone will get you a ton of money later down the line. And then lastly, I would say try to find out after you've budgeted where you can budget and remove expenses where you can while also still living a happy life that's appropriate for you. I would say remove things that take your time that aren't productive. And so I'm all about having nice things when you want nice things and taking time off when you want to take your time off. But when I notice that I'm doing something consistently over and over, I'll start taking a look at how I budget that time. So there are times where I'm like, this is probably too much Netflix. Let's back off and maybe just do that for an hour a day at the end of the day. When I'm spending way too much on things that suck time, that aren't helping me become productive or learn and grow, I start to really have an honest conversation about that. And so I apply those types of things upon my financial life, but also my day-to-day living. And I think those would span across. If you ask any wealthy businessman, while at the same time asking any poor SRNA that's struggling financially on how to get through their day to day and budget for the rest of the year. I think all these concepts would be time tested throughout the different tax brackets.
Yeah, it's super helpful. And like you said, not just applicable to finances, but just how you live your life. It's, yeah, powerful. Vinny, thank you for taking time to be with us. I know you're busy, and I know that this is not a small thing for you to come on here and talk with us. So we really appreciate it. I know our listeners really appreciate it as well. This is kind of a break from our normal didactic type discussion, but I think this is, just so vital to the development of um, your career as you go through school and then on beyond how to manage your finances and how you can set yourself up for success. So if people want to follow you, what are the best ways they can get in touch with you? You want to share those real quick with us so we can make sure I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. So the main platform that Amber and I are both on is Instagram. You'll find me at Vinny Two Guns, Amber Craves, CRNA on Instagram. YouTube, we have a little channel that we started out with Amazing Race and stuff that's called at the Dream Team. The businesses that I run that I'm heavily invested in is Ascend Anesthesia, which is a tax efficient CEU company that helps you write off some of your taxable income to be able to use your CEU money at the same time. So I'm all about the win-win situation. So that's like a 4x win with that company for my CRNAs. And then Launch Lending is my private equity a private lending company that I do with single family homes where we buy and sell rehab them. And so we're able to take your money, and let's say you give us $100,000, we're typically able to make about $1,100 to $1,200 a month back for you. And so if you're just looking for a place to deploy your capital, Launch Lending is a all CRNA private lending company that I have started to kind of create an educational standpoint, because like you said, Tanner, people aren't talking about money because they told us you can't talk about politics, religion, or money, right? And so here we are 30 years down the line not talking to each other about it. And that's just a way for them to stop us from growing. And so I'm here to change that, man. I want every American to be powerful. I want them to be a vital part of the economy and also influential. And so if I am able to use my private lending platform where we're teaching CRNAs how to do this, that's what we're doing. So it's a very small group, so it's super intimate. And then lastly, my last business is teaching people how to go from W-2 to 1099, because if I can make you a business, man, I'm opening up thousands of tax codes for you, giving you strategies that only a businessman can do. And so I made a quick little e-course that teaches you how to get from W-2 to 1099. So now you're a businessman. Now I could pop the top off of this whole thing and really bring you to a whole different level at that point. So those are the ways you could get a hold of me.
Love it. Well, we have a sneaky suspicion that there will be a part 2 to this episode. We didn't even get through, like 80% of what we wanted to talk about tonight. So,
I was looking forward to trust and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. But
Vinny's got a lot more for you. So make sure you drop in your comments, your suggestions. We'll try to keep those in mind as we'll probably run this back in a little bit. But Vinny, thank you so much, man. It's always a pleasure. And like I said, I can't say enough. Thank you for taking the time for us. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate the opportunity. Much love for sure.